So, this video is a response reaction to Punk Rock MBA's recent video, 3 Reasons Why Rock is Dying. I do like the dude's channel and his outlook on rock music, which does include metal, and there's really nothing wrong with what he said in this video that I hugely disagree with. Now, I'm not going to play his entire video, I'll show clips and then say the points that I agree with or disagree with. So here we go.
Well, first of all, is rock actually dead or dying? To me, the answer is glaringly obvious. Yes, in terms of mainstream popularity, rock is definitely dying, if not completely dead.
Rock music has never been mainstream. Okay, yeah, some bands do make it big. Some songs do get added to everyone's stupid I like everything playlist. And certain time periods did see movements where they were part of the mainstream, only for that movement to die out. But I've never seen rock as mainstream. It's always been the alternative to what's mainstream, such as bubblegum pop, disco, new wave, country pop, hip hop, and whatever you classify EDM as.
Problem number one with the fans is that, honestly, they're just completely stuck in the past. Let's look at the lineups for some of the big festivals both here in the US and abroad. For example, Riot Fest. Of all the artists in the top 2 lines, only 2 of them were formed after the 90s. So the youngest bands in that group are 20 years old. Quite a few of them are 80s bands, and in the case of the Descendants, they're a 70s band. Or let's look at Download, one of the biggest festivals over in the UK. Again, it's mostly 80s and 90s bands. There's a couple younger bands like Hailstorm and Enter Shikari, but even those bands are well over 10 years old. And I could keep going with more examples, but you get the idea.
Now, this is a point that Finn is right about. Nearly every rock and metal festival is dominated by bands that have been around for more than a decade or 2 or 3 or 4, and that seems to be a trend with a lot of bands nowadays. Many bands I listen to are making it big now, as in they're headlining festivals, arenas, or simply playing to venues that hold a few thousand people, despite the fact they've been around for almost 20 years. Some of them can routinely play huge shows in Europe, but then when they tour in America as headliners, even if they are American, they still tend to play in venues like House of Blues. That, I think, has more to do with the music scene and everyone's taste in America versus how it is worldwide. But it's a testament to the bands themselves. If they don't enjoy doing what they do, for the limited exposure and income they get versus hip-hop and country acts, they wouldn't still be playing and touring relentlessly for that long.
And then you contrast that with a hip-hop festival like, say, Rolling Loud. Just could not be more different. It's the exact polar opposite of what you see at a rock festival. Yes, there's a handful of older artists like Lil Wayne and DMX, and I guess you would say Gucci Mane is older by rap standards. But most of the top names on that flyer are people like Juice WRLD, Sheck West, Gunna, 21 Savage that have been putting out music for 3 to 5 years. The headliners are all fresh blood. So you can see the contrast between the rock and hip-hop festival.
That's because people forget about the newer acts so much quicker when it comes to hip-hop. When I coached a bunch of 15 and 16-year-olds and asked them for songs to pump them up in the locker room before a game, they requested guys like Travis Scott and Shoreline Mafia. Lame. But then within a few weeks, they were already complaining,
"That song is so old, put something current on."
"You're the ones who picked the songs."
"Yeah, but I'm already tired of it. I want something more current."
It was released this year. Hip-hop is much more mainstream now than it was in the days of Public Enemy and Snoop Dogg. The hottest new acts from 5 to 10 years ago are often forgot about, just like any crappy pop artists. Rock and metal bands from 25 years ago had paid their dues, gained a steady following, albeit slowly, I'll admit, and someone like me is always finding old and new bands to check out.
And why is this a problem? Well, it should be pretty obvious. If the top slots in these festivals are all dominated by the same older bands, it means that we are not developing new stars to take their place when those bands retire. And remember, these guys are in their 40s, 50s, sometimes even their 60s, so they're not going to be here forever. You can tell me all day long that rock is doing great because this festival or that festival sells 1 billion tickets and Iron Maiden is selling out stadiums all over the world, and hey, that's great. I'm sure the promoter is happy about that. But what about 5 years from now? Who's going to be selling out arenas then?
Finn's right. Okay, Iron Maiden still sells out stadiums every tour because they're freaking Iron Maiden. But at the end of the day, this decade is proving to be hard for rock and metal fans everywhere. Sabbath is done. Slayer is on their last tour, supposedly. And who honestly knows how much longer your favorite bands will keep going? I will probably take the day off work when I hear that Metallica announces they no longer will tour. But when the old bands are done, I'm not going to give up. I'll find new bands.
And it's not just the festivals, it's not just the press, like literally everything about rock culture is decades behind basically the rest of the world. Rock fans still listen to the radio, they're still obsessed with physical media like CDs and vinyl that other people stopped using 10 or 20 years ago.
Okay, maybe he's joking when he says this, but I don't buy physical media anymore. Mainly because my car stereo doesn't accept it. I also don't listen to the radio, as there's enough music on my phone to play all the bands and genres that I want to listen to. And if I can't find a song or artist that I feel like at the moment, I actually embrace streaming services like Pandora, Spotify, or even YouTube, because they can expose me to a new band or a song that I haven't heard. But a reason why fans like buying physical media is for the artwork and the stuff you can check out, like printed lyrics, pictures, or other things. You don't get that from streaming or even downloading it off iTunes.
Axl, Slash, Gwen Stefani, Tommy Lee, Phil Anselmo, everybody in Blink. These are all like larger than life, huge personalities with just undeniable star power. And that was true not just at the mainstream level, but also at the alternative, like not quite mainstream kind of level. And where are the rock stars now? Not in rock, that's for sure. These days, rappers and DJs are bigger rock stars than rock bands are. Drake, Lil Pump, Cardi B, like that's the new Axl Rose, Tommy Lee, and Gwen Stefani. It just kind of shows that it's no longer cool to be a rock star in rock.
That's something that's definitely true. It seems that the more successful of a rock star you are, the more hated you are. And the newer bands who get influenced and look up to those guys have basically said, well, we want to play and do what we enjoy, but we don't want to go down those paths associated with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Even if rappers today are the new rock stars, many new rock and metal bands see the stories of excess and stupid behavior as cautionary tales and don't want to be associated with it. I'm not saying newer bands are total saints, but it's definitely a push to avoid bad press. But Finn's point is that even bad press is still press. People may have hated Axl Rose back in the day, but he still got enough notoriety for people to generate interest and come see his shows. And that's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Problem number two is that rock bands don't want to be part of like mainstream pop culture anymore. So what I mean by that is like there's this weird dynamic where rock bands and fans simultaneously like hate on and reject mainstream pop culture, yet are also super mad and butthurt that they're not part of the conversation in mainstream pop culture anymore. And so you might be saying, who cares? Fuck mainstream pop culture. I hate all that shit anyway. Well, the reason why that matters is very simple. If rock is not part of mainstream pop culture, then it becomes irrelevant and unknown to everybody other than the like dedicated few who are willing to like really seek it out.
All right, sure. We had bands make it big back in the day and cross over into mainstream. You can argue that nu metal in the early 2000s was the last big wave of mainstream rock and metal. But rock was still not the most popular form of music. I know because I was around during the nu metal days, and that wasn't what was always being played on the radio. Every decade had their mainstream acts, and those who were rebellious rock alternatives. For example, in the 70s, if you hated ABBA, you still had Led Zeppelin and AC/DC. Remember that there was a point in the 80s when MTV would avoid Metallica like the plague? And Metallica still gained a huge following before the Black Album put them into superstardom. This was before the internet, when you had to rely on word of mouth and physical media. Nowadays, rock is, yeah, of course, it's not as big as other genres, but it's much easier to seek out thanks to the internet. It may never be mainstream, but it doesn't have to be. It may go up and down in popularity, but there will always be fans like me wanting something different. I don't care how much the mainstream will try to shove guys like Travis Scott, Kanye, and Drake down my throat. I don't like their music. I don't think I ever will. And there's always going to be a good rock and metal band to check out. But on the flip side, I will admit, yeah, it would be nice if more eyes can be on the product.
Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys are saying,
fuck that shit, fuck the Kardashians, fuck MTV, we don't want to be part of that bullshit.
but I think what it comes down to is this. Rock fans and bands need to decide what they want. Like, do you want to be mainstream or not? You need to pick one and then make sure that your actions align with the things that you say you want. If you're cool with rock continuing down the path that it's on, then great. Just don't be surprised in like 7 to 10 years from now when the average age of a rock fan is 38, teenagers barely know what a guitar is, and a rock band is lucky to draw enough people to fill a bar. And if you do want rock to be mainstream again, well, then you have to understand that this is the entertainment business and you need to treat it like a business. You've got to stop that weird schizophrenic thinking where you like simultaneously hate and reject mainstream pop culture yet also expect them to embrace rock. And you've also got to start building new stars, fresh blood, before the current ones die of old age. Because at the end of the day, rock fans and bands, the fate of the genre is in your hands. You decide what is popular, you decide what's successful, you choose what happens to the genre, and you choose that with your actions by where you spend your money and where you spend your attention.
This is simply an ongoing trend that has been happening since the 90s, or even earlier. People who enjoyed rock music in the 60s and 70s weren't the biggest fans of the 80s scene. Fans of 80s hair metal hated the grunge movement. Fans who still enjoyed everything prior hated post-grunge and nu metal. A lot of older fans who still enjoyed grunge and nu metal hated metalcore. Rinse, slather, repeat. Older rock and metal fans are very toxic when it comes to that. And you know what? They don't have to enjoy the newer bands. They really don't. But they should be happy and encourage younger fans to embrace them, because at least the younger fans are showing an interest in louder, heavier forms of music rather than fall into the electronic pop, country, and hip-hop crap. Otherwise, yeah, Finn's right. They shouldn't act so butthurt when bands like Bring Me the Horizon expand into electronic pop rock after starting out as a deathcore band that went nowhere because nobody in the metal community would embrace them. So in conclusion, Finn is mainly right in this video about rock in the mainstream is dying. And yes, I wish more people got into rock and metal than currently. But it's not going to stop me from enjoying the bands I like. That's pretty much all I can say about this video. I enjoyed it, but he inspired me enough to want to react and post my thoughts about it. If you like what I had to say, please share the hell out of this reaction. I'm always open to further suggestions on what may inspire me to keep coming back out and sharing my thoughts with you guys. Thank you for watching.